The last light of Alderaan flickers across my window as I record this final transmission. For generations, my family has documented our planet's history, never imagining I would chronicle its end. Outside, Imperial Star Destroyers hang in our sky like knives. Inside the palace walls, Senator Organa whispers of resistance, while Princess Leia carries desperate plans to distant stars. Citizens still walk our markets, still admire our mountains, still believe in tomorrow. They cannot see what I see in the movements of stormtroopers, in the fear behind diplomatic smiles, in the silent preparations of those who know. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to witness the final hours of an entire world, knowing you cannot save it? The holorecorder light blinks red in the darkness of my quarters. Transmission Journal 997. Every record keeper on Alderaan maintains archives spanning generations. I merely continue tradition. Ancestors of my ancestors kept records through the Clone Wars, through the rise of the Empire, through endless cycles of conflict that never quite reached our peaceful world. Now I continue their work, though something feels different. The air itself seems charged with portent, like the calm before an electrical storm. I serve as aide to Senator Bail Organa, keeper of his calendar, arranger of meetings, recorder of events. The official story, neat and orderly. These personal transmissions serve a different purpose. Here I speak truths too dangerous for public records. Here I leave breadcrumbs for future historians to follow, should the need arise. I never imagined anyone would need to understand how it ended. Today I walked the royal palace grounds at dawn. Frost glittered across the courtyard stones. The Juran Mountains stood sentinel beyond the city, their peaks turned golden by early sunlight. I heard birdsong from the palace gardens and laughter from the kitchen staff preparing the morning meal. So ordinary, so perfect in its ordinariness. Imperial Navy vessels hang in orbit above our world. 3 Star Destroyers arrived last week with no explanation. Their presence feels heavier each day, a weight pressing down upon us. Palace staff create excuses to step outside and stare upward, as though witnessing a coming storm. The ships are visible even in daylight, grey wedges against blue sky. Senator Organa says not to worry. His voice remains steady, his manner calm. But I see the weight in his shoulders when he thinks no one watches. I notice the encrypted transmissions increasing in frequency. The private meetings with trusted allies growing longer, voices dropping to whispers when others approach. Something gathers momentum, something beyond my security clearance. The Imperial Governor assures the public that the naval presence serves merely as protection. From what? He never specifies. Citizens pretend to believe him. We all pretend many things these days. I record this now as witness. To what? I do not yet know. The mountains of Alderaan have stood for millennia. Perhaps they will outlast whatever comes. I pass Imperial stormtroopers in the Grand Plaza now. Regular patrols. Their white armor gleams in sunlight, visors reflecting distorted images of our beautiful city. They move with mechanical precision between crowds of citizens dressed in traditional blues and silvers. The contrast could not be more stark. Beauty and brutality side by side, neither acknowledging the other. Palace security reports increased surveillance activity. Communications undergo deeper monitoring. Searches occur at spaceports without explanation. Travelers report delays, interrogations, questions about destinations, about contacts, about loyalties. Imperial officers review passenger manifests with greater scrutiny. Ships undergo inspection before departure clearance. I observe Senator Organa growing more cautious with official communications. His public statements emphasize Alderaanian commitment to peace, to imperial law, to proper channels of governance. His unofficial movements tell a different story. Late meetings in secured rooms, transmissions sent through unmarked channels, conversations that halt when doors open unexpectedly. My position grants me certain insights. I see the palace security rotations adjusted to create blind spots. I notice staff schedules modified to empty specific corridors at specific times. I recognize faces from other worlds moving through the palace under diplomatic credentials that appeared overnight in the system. Last night I walked past the small conference room adjacent to the senator's office. The door stood slightly open. Inside sat Senator Organa with a woman I recognized from Holonews broadcasts, Senator Mon Mothma of Chandrila. Their conversation ceased when they sensed my presence. Senator Organa nodded politely, as though their meeting were routine. It was not listed in any official calendar. I continue my duties without comment. I arrange meetings, manage communications, maintain records, and I watch. Something builds toward critical mass. A resistance forms in shadows. Not my place to judge its righteousness or folly. My duty remains to record, to witness. Even now, I hold to the principles of my position. The mountains stand silent beyond my window. Their permanence comforts me. They have witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, weathered storms of unimaginable power. What is one more historical moment to them? Yet something whispers that this moment differs from others. Tonight, Imperial security personnel entered the royal archives without authorization. Palace guards discovered them accessing historical records, star charts, industrial production logs. When confronted, they presented documentation signed by Governor Learn granting unlimited access to all information systems. Senator Organa filed an official complaint. The complaint disappeared from Imperial records within hours. Citizens speak of increased restrictions in hushed voices. Public gatherings require new permits. Academic research undergoes additional review. Art exhibitions face content evaluations before opening. Communications experience mysterious delays or disappearances. The machinery of oppression advances one small increment each day, so gradual that many fail to notice the accumulation of changes. I attended a banquet tonight, one of many such functions in my capacity as senatorial aide. Imperial officers mingled with Alderaanian nobility, exchanging pleasantries over wine harvested from the lakeside vineyards. Such strange juxtaposition. The oppressor and the oppressed raising glasses to shared prosperity. Captain Relov of Imperial Intelligence spoke with me briefly. His interest seemed casual. Questions about my work, about palace security protocols, about Senator Organa's habits and associates. His smile never reached his eyes. I provided answers consistent with public records. He knew I withheld more. I knew he knew. A dance of mutual acknowledgement without overt confrontation. He mentioned my transmission journals, asked about their contents, their purpose. Something cold moved through me at his specific knowledge of my private recordings. I explained the cultural tradition, the historical significance. I did not mention entries like this one. Captain Relov placed his hand on my shoulder before departing, a gesture of familiarity that felt like ownership. His grip tightened momentarily, a reminder of power, of vulnerability, a warning without words. I returned to my quarters afterward and checked security protocols on my personal systems, found evidence of access attempts, multiple intrusions, sophisticated but detectable. Someone searches for something specific. For now, my more sensitive transmissions remain secured through encryption methods not standard to Imperial systems. I wonder how long such protections will last. The mountains outside my window look different tonight. Their permanence suddenly seems illusion. Given enough power, even mountains can be reduced to dust. I observed Senator Organa today in consultation with Chief Architect Voron regarding palace security upgrades. They reviewed blueprints showing access tunnels not included in public plans, discussed modifications to communication systems, to power relays, to security protocols. The conversation halted when they noticed my presence. Senator Organa later explained the need for certain contingencies in uncertain times. His voice remained calm, reasonable, yet I noted the subtle tremor in his hand as he activated the privacy field around his office before speaking. I record this not as accusation but as context. Reasonable people take unreasonable precautions when circumstances warrant. The question remains whether our circumstances truly warrant such measures or whether fear drives us to excess. The Royal Science Academy has experienced increasing imperial oversight. Research requires additional approvals. Certain projects face unexpected funding cuts. Professors with outspoken views find their access to laboratories restricted for administrative reasons never fully explained. Alderaan, professor of political history and a vocal critic of imperial governance models, disappeared 3 days ago. Official reports claim she accepted a prestigious position at an imperial research facility. Her family received notification but no communication from her directly. Her personal belongings remain in her office, including half-finished work on her terminal. The administration discourages questions about her absence. The air feels thinner each day, as though oxygen slowly depletes around us. Citizens move with greater caution, speak with greater care. Eyes track imperial presence, calculating safe pathways through public spaces. We become experts in risk assessment without conscious thought. Imperial star destroyers remain in orbit, silent sentinels, their presence now normalized. The extraordinary becomes ordinary through persistence. Citizens no longer pause to look upward. The instruments of potential destruction fade into background awareness. I wonder what other threats we fail to recognize through familiarity. The mountains endure beyond the city, indifferent to our concerns. I envy their perspective. I walked through the Glarus market this morning, a routine errand to purchase spices from the southern continent. The market should have bustled with activity, vendors calling their wares, customers haggling over prices. Instead, I found subdued conversations, furtive exchanges. People moved with purpose, completing transactions quickly before returning to homes or workplaces. Imperial stormtroopers patrolled in groups of 4, weapons held ready. No longer the ceremonial presence of previous months. Now they actively monitored conversations, demanded identification from random citizens, conducted spot inspections of merchant inventories. I passed Mira Syndulla's textile stall and found it empty, goods removed, counter wiped clean. When I inquired with neighboring vendors, they looked away, suddenly fascinated by inventory management or customer assistance. Only elderly Torrin Bell, spice merchant from the mountains, met my eyes directly. "They came before dawn," he whispered as he measured saffron into a small container. Asked questions about shipments she received, about customers who purchased her goods. She answered truthfully. They took her anyway. What was her crime? I asked. Her brother serves in the Alliance, Torrin replied, his voice barely audible. That makes her dangerous by association. The concept of an alliance remained unspoken in official channels. A rebellion against imperial authority existed only as rumor, as whispered possibility. Yet here stood confirmation in the form of an empty market stall. In the fear visible on faces of those who knew better than to acknowledge its reality, I purchased my spices and departed without further questions. Throughout the transaction, a stormtrooper watched from 10 meters distance. Whether monitoring me specifically or conducting general surveillance, the effect remained the same. The weight of observation, the pressure of potential consequences. Upon returning to the palace, I discovered additional security checkpoints installed overnight. Palace staff now undergo identity confirmation and belongings inspection. The procedures apply equally to all, from kitchen workers to diplomatic personnel. Equality in suspicion. Senator Organa emerged from his office as I passed through screening. He noticed my expression, offered a reassuring smile that failed to reach his eyes. The weight on his shoulders seems heavier each day. He carries knowledge he cannot share, burdens he cannot distribute. I wonder if he sleeps anymore. Alderaan has always represented peace in a galaxy torn by conflict. Our cultural commitment to non-violence distinguishes us among worlds. We renounced weapons generations ago, choosing instead the path of diplomacy, of example. The knowledge that imperial forces could crush us without meaningful resistance underlies all calculations now. What defense exists for those committed to peace when confronted by those committed to power? The mountains offer no answer tonight. Today marked Princess Leia's departure for a diplomatic mission. The official announcement cited humanitarian concerns requiring personal attention. Her transport left under unusually tight security protocols. Senator Organa personally escorted her to the landing pad, their farewell conducted without ceremonial observers. I stood at a distance, respecting their privacy while maintaining visual confirmation of departure procedures as required by my position. The senator embraced his daughter with uncommon intensity. When they separated, I observed conversation not audible from my position. The princess nodded firmly, her expression resolute. Something passed between them beyond words, beyond ordinary, parental concern. Senator Organa watched her transport until it disappeared into atmosphere. He remained motionless several minutes afterward, gaze fixed on empty sky. When he turned toward the palace, I glimpsed naked grief before his political mask re-engaged. He nodded acknowledgement as he passed my position, but offered no explanation for his emotional display. Hours later, I overheard fragments of conversation between Senator Organa and General Riekan of Alderaanian security forces. References to contingency protocols, to information transmission security, to fallback positions, discussion of an installation on Yavin. The conversation ceased when they detected my approach. General Riekan departed for inspection of planetary defense systems shortly afterward, a curious allocation of resources for a planet without significant military capability. The purpose seemed unclear unless considered within context of recent events. Preparation without expectation of adequacy, the appearance of readiness perhaps more important than actual defensive capacity. Imperial monitoring of communications increased again today. Random signal interruptions occur with greater frequency. Official explanation cites technical difficulties requiring Imperial engineering assistance. Few believe this justification, yet none challenge it openly. The alternative explanations raise questions too dangerous to articulate. I secured these transmissions behind additional encryption layers. Technical skills acquired through years of information management serve me now in ways never anticipated. Still, I harbor no illusions about permanent security. Given sufficient motivation and resources, any system yields its secrets. The purpose of these records shifts in my mind, no longer mere historical documentation, but potential evidence. Of what crime or tragedy, I cannot yet specify. The sense of approaching culmination grows stronger. Events accelerate toward some threshold not yet visible but increasingly certain. The mountains fade into darkness tonight, their presence known but unseen. Like so many truths in these uncertain days, I witnessed a disturbing incident this morning in the central government district. A citizen questioned a stormtrooper about detention procedures after observing an arrest. The question itself seemed reasonable, asked without obvious hostility or political intent. The stormtrooper responded by striking the citizen across the face with his weapon. When the fallen citizen attempted to stand, additional troopers moved to surround him. I expected public outcry, intervention from nearby Alderaanians. Instead, I observed averted eyes, quickened paces. People created distance between themselves and the confrontation with practiced efficiency. The normalization of brutality completes itself when witnesses choose calculated ignorance over dangerous witness. The troopers transported the injured citizen to an Imperial facility without identifying themselves or their authority for the detention. No charges were announced, no rights acknowledged. The entire interaction lasted less than 2 minutes from question to disappearance. Upon reporting this incident to palace security, I received neither surprise nor assurance of investigation. Commander Vika thanked me for my report and advised discretion regarding further discussion. Her expression conveyed the futility of official response. The machinery of justice stalls when confronted with power operating beyond accountability. Bail Organa spent much of today in communication with off-world contacts. His conversations occurred behind security protocols, preventing even routine monitoring. As his aide, I would normally maintain records of all official communications. Today, he required no such documentation. The absence itself becomes significant. Actions undertaken without record suggest actions undertaken without sanction. I find myself thinking of old academic discussions regarding resistance to tyranny. The philosophical questions seemed abstract then, hypothetical explorations of ethical frameworks. When does obligation to law yield to obligation to justice? At what point does compliance become complicity? What responsibility falls to those who recognize the moment of necessary action? The practical applications of such questions carry consequences now. Lives balance on their answers. Rumors spread through the palace of mass arrests in the southern provinces. Communications from the region experience unexplained disruptions. Travel advisories recommend postponement of non-essential visits. The official explanation cites environmental concerns, industrial accidents requiring containment. Satellite imagery becomes suddenly unavailable due to technical difficulties. So many technical difficulties lately. The tools of transparency fail with suspicious synchronicity. I check the mountains through my window. Their physical presence reassures. Some realities persist despite official narratives. Some truths remain regardless of documentation or suppression. For now, we endure. For now, we witness. For now, we prepare without knowing the precise nature of what approaches. The Alderaan University grounds empty of students despite ongoing academic terms. Official notices cite curriculum reorganization requiring temporary suspension of classes. Students receive academic credits without completion of coursework. Those questioning the policy face administrative review. Professor Callan Rono attempted to continue instruction in the philosophy department despite suspension orders. Imperial security personnel removed him from campus yesterday. The administration describes his removal as voluntary leave for personal reasons. His residence stands empty, possessions undisturbed, as though he stepped out momentarily and never returned. Senator Organa cancelled 3 diplomatic functions scheduled for today. His office cited health concerns requiring rest. I observed him in consultation with General Recon and members of the Royal Advisory Council. Their discussion occurred in the secure conference facility beneath the palace. No recordings exist of their meeting, no minutes preserved for archival purposes. When Senator Organa emerged hours later, he requested immediate preparation of multiple diplomatic vessels for humanitarian missions. The specific nature of these missions remains unspecified, their destinations classified even beyond my security clearance. Preparations commenced without delay, crews assembled from personnel with prior security verification. I assisted with logistical arrangements as required by my position. The urgency behind the requests created procedural anomalies. Verification protocols abbreviated. Resource allocations approved without standard oversight. Multiple authorizations granted under emergency provisions never officially activated. Nobody questioned these irregularities. Competent professionals performed their duties with quiet efficiency, acknowledging the unacknowledgeable through action rather than words. Complicity through competence. Perhaps the most Alderaanian form of resistance possible. Captain Relov visited the palace again today. His presence in the diplomatic reception area seemed casual, his conversation with administrative staff informal. His attention focused particularly on ship deployment records, on crew assignments, on flight plans. All information technically within Imperial authority to review, yet the specific nature of his interest raised concerns among staff. I monitored his access from my terminal, noted his particular focus on recent diplomatic missions, on personnel assignments, on communication logs. His examination appeared methodical, professional, the calm precision of his investigation somehow more threatening than overt aggression would have been. When Captain Relov departed, he paused at my workstation, inquired about my transmission journals again, asked whether I maintained records of Senator Organa's unofficial meetings. His tone remained conversational, almost friendly. The questions themselves carried the threat, not their delivery. I provided answers consistent with official protocols, explained the limited scope of my documentation responsibilities, expressed appropriate respect for Imperial security concerns while revealing nothing of consequence. The familiar dance of compliant resistance. Captain Relov smiled before leaving. "You would be wise to consider your future carefully," he said. "Loyalty to old systems becomes costly when new realities assert themselves." The implied offer hung between us: collaboration in exchange for safety, information in exchange for favorable treatment. A transaction proposed with polite euphemisms masking its true nature. I thanked him for his concern and returned to my duties without further response. Some decisions require no deliberation. The mountains beyond the city gather evening shadows, their presence constant despite changing light. I take comfort in their witness. Someone must observe without yielding. Someone must remember without revision. The palace operates under increased security protocols today. Guards verify identities with greater scrutiny. Sensitive areas undergo additional access restrictions. Communications receive enhanced encryption without explanation. The atmosphere feels charged with unstated urgency. Senior staff conducted departmental reviews requiring unusual documentation procedures, preservation of critical records through redundant systems, verification of emergency protocols, distribution of authority under contingency scenarios, preparations without named purpose, yet purpose clearly understood by participants. I assisted Senator Organa with private correspondence to families of diplomatic service members currently deployed. The messages contained personal expressions of gratitude, of acknowledgement for service and sacrifice. The senator recorded each message individually, speaking directly to specific circumstances and contributions. Hours of recognition for people whose work often goes unnoticed. These recordings carry the weight of farewell, though never stated explicitly. Gratitude offered before its expression becomes impossible. Recognition granted while capability remains. The behavior of a man settling accounts before departure. I asked no questions regarding the purpose of these messages. The senator offered no explanation beyond standard diplomatic courtesy. We maintained the fiction of routine documentation while both recognizing the extraordinary nature of the task. Midway through recordings, Senator Organa paused, removed his official insignia of office, held it momentarily before returning it to position. "For some men, duty becomes identity," he said. "The distinction between who we are and what we serve disappears. Perhaps that transformation defines true service." His statement seemed addressed beyond our immediate context, a reflection offered to history, to witness, to judgment beyond contemporary assessment. I included his words in the official transcript without comment. Imperial presence intensifies throughout Alderaan. Stormtrooper patrols increase in frequency and visibility. Security checkpoints appear at transportation hubs, at government buildings, at educational institutions. Citizens undergo identification verification during routine movements through the city. The mechanisms of control advance with industrial efficiency. Rumors circulate about a massive imperial construction project. Unusual resource allocations. Rare materials requisitioned without explanation. Scientific personnel reassigned from research positions to classified military applications. Planetary mining operations expanded beyond sustainable parameters. The pattern suggests mobilization on unprecedented scale. Senator Organa receives intelligence briefings with increased frequency. Each report brings deeper concern, visible in his expression, in his bearing, in the intensity of his subsequent communications. Whatever approaches, its shadow grows more defined through accumulated information. The mountains stand silhouetted against sunset. Their permanence seems suddenly fragile. Geological time compresses in my imagination. Even mountains eventually surrender to sufficient force. I wonder what force approaches now. I witnessed Princess Leia's message to Senator Organa today. A secure transmission delivered through encrypted channels received in the senator's private communication chamber. I remained present at his request, though the conversation occurred beyond my normal documentation responsibilities. The princess appeared via hologram, her image occasionally distorted by transmission interference. She spoke quickly, details of her diplomatic mission interspersed with coded references I could not interpret. The information seemed to confirm Senator Organa's worst fears, while simultaneously offering some fragment of hope. "Plans transmitted successfully," she reported, proceeding to Rendezvous Point Alpha. "Anticipate Imperial intervention before completion. Contingencies in place." Senator Organa questioned her regarding security measures, extraction protocols, fallback positions. Their conversation utilized technical terminology and reference points clearly established in previous communications not documented in official records. A private language evolved between them for precisely such circumstances. The princess concluded with a personal message. "If outcomes proceed unfavorably, remember my commitment to our shared principles. What we preserve matters more than what we lose." Senator Organa attempted to respond with reassurance. The princess interrupted with unexpected intensity. "Father," she said, "we both know the stakes. I accepted them long ago. Honor my choice by allowing its consequences without regret." The transmission ended before the senator could reply. He remained motionless before the empty projection space, hands clasped behind his back with military precision. When he finally turned, I observed unconcealed grief momentarily before his political mask re-engaged. "We both witnessed something not meant for documentation," he said. I nodded, acknowledgement, understanding the implicit request for discretion. Later, Senator Organa summoned General Recon for private consultation. Their conversation occurred beyond my access, yet the general's expression upon departure suggested significant developments. He immediately ordered activation of emergency communication protocols across planetary defense networks. Preparations without publicly stated purpose accelerated throughout command structures. Imperial vessels continue orbital positions above Alderaan. Their presence now includes smaller patrol craft conducting atmospheric operations. Official explanation cites security exercises coordinated with planetary authorities. No such coordination appears in government records accessible through my clearance. Citizens modify behaviors in response to imperial scrutiny. Public gatherings disperse more quickly. Conversations in monitored spaces focus on inconsequential topics. Information exchanges occur through older methods resistant to technological surveillance, written notes, personal meetings, whispered updates in passing. Primitive communications made necessary by primitive fears. Tonight I find myself cataloging memories with unusual intensity. The specific quality of light on the Alderaan Mountains during winter sunrise. The sound of seasonal bells during solstice celebrations. The fragrance of night-blooming flowers in the palace gardens. Details previously taken for granted suddenly precious in their specificity. The impulse to preserve through memory what might otherwise be lost troubles me. Perhaps I grow needlessly concerned. Perhaps events proceed toward resolution rather than catastrophe. Perhaps the mountains will outlast whatever comes, as they have outlasted so much before. Yet something in Senator Organa's expression after the princess's transmission haunts me. The look of a man seeing beyond present circumstance to consequence already determined, already accepted, already mourned. Palace security detected unauthorized transmission monitoring throughout diplomatic quarters. Imperial security personnel established surveillance without formal notification or authorization from Alderaanian authorities. When confronted by palace security, they produced retroactive permission documentation signed by Governor Lern. The surveillance specifically targeted communications involving Senator Organa and his primary staff. My transmissions underwent particular scrutiny according to security analysis. Multiple infiltration attempts focused on my personal archives, on encoded journals, on private records maintained outside official channels. General Recon advised immediate security protocol implementation level 7. All sensitive communications now route through isolated systems, physically separated from central networks. Verification procedures require direct authentication rather than remote confirmation. Information compartmentalization protocols fragment access across multiple systems, requiring separate authorizations. Senator Organa approved these measures without hesitation. Yet we both recognize their limited effectiveness against Imperial technical capabilities. Security becomes relative rather than absolute. Delay rather than prevention, the illusion of protection rather than its reality. I secured these transmissions through methods developed during early resistance to Imperial information control. Techniques preserved by archivists anticipating precisely such circumstances. We prepare for conflicts we hope never arrive, then find ourselves grateful for preparation when hope fails. Imperial Star Destroyers adjusted orbital positions today. Their new configuration creates overlapping coverage of primary population centers. Military vessels now positioned with optimal firing solutions for planetary targets. The pattern cannot be mistaken by anyone with basic understanding of Imperial naval doctrine. Official explanation describes tactical exercises unrelated to Alderaanian security, routine maneuvers conducted throughout the sector, nothing requiring public concern or governmental response, the fiction maintained through official channels, while reality asserts itself visibly above our world. I accompanied Senator Organa to the Alderaan Memorial Gardens this afternoon. An unscheduled visit, personal rather than official. He walked among monuments commemorating generations of Alderaanian leadership, paused, particularly at tributes to those who guided our world through previous conflicts. The Clone Wars, the corporate secession, the Alderaan crisis. Leaders who preserved our commitment to peace despite extraordinary pressure toward militarization. Senator Organa spoke little during our visit. His attention seemed focused beyond present circumstances. When he finally broke silence, his words carried the weight of historical context. Every generation believes its challenge is unprecedented, he said. Every leader imagines their choices uniquely difficult. Perhaps that illusion proves necessary. If we recognized ourselves merely as repetitions of previous patterns, we might surrender to fatalism rather than struggling towards something better. I offered no response, sensing his need for witness rather than conversation. Some moments require presence without participation. Upon returning to the palace, Senator Organa requested privacy for meditation. His spiritual practices normally maintain strict scheduling, their consistency part of his disciplined approach to governance. Today, he seemed to seek not routine comfort, but specific preparation, the quieting of mind before decisive action, the centering of purpose before irreversible commitment. Tonight I look upon the mountains with new appreciation, their presence suddenly precious in its familiarity, the specific outline of peaks against darkening sky, the particular quality of evening light across higher elevations still touched by Sunday details I have observed countless times without truly seeing until now. How much we fail to value until its permanence comes into question. I sense acceleration toward some culmination. Events compress toward a moment not yet visible but increasingly certain. The weight of approaching consequence settles across our world. Some recognize its pressure, some proceed in determined ignorance. All move toward the same destination regardless of awareness. Senator Organa convened the Royal Advisory Council in emergency session today. Attendance limited to senior advisors with hereditary security clearance. Communication protocols implemented at highest restriction levels. No recordings permitted, no documentation beyond minimal procedural requirements. My presence required by position rather than preference. Senator Organa specifically requested my attendance despite security concerns. Some records must survive, he explained privately before the session. Some witness must preserve truth beyond official narrative. The Council received intelligence regarding Imperial military activity near Scarif, reports of engagement between Alliance forces and Imperial security installations, confirmation of Princess Leia's involvement in operation to secure critical information, details fragmented due to communication, disruption, battle damage, information control countermeasures. Analysis suggested successful acquisition of targeted intelligence by Alliance operatives. Pursuit of Princess Leia's vessel by Imperial forces confirmed through multiple sources. Her current status remains unverified. Last confirmed position placed her ship in hyperspace on trajectory that could potentially include Alderaan within calculated destinations. Council. Response divided between immediate action and strategic patience. Arguments presented for planetary defense activation, for emergency evacuation protocols, for diplomatic intervention through Imperial Senate channels. Senator Organa listened to all positions without revealing preference until deliberations concluded. His decision, when finally delivered, carried the clarity of inevitable choice rather than deliberated conclusion. "We have planned for this moment longer than many realize," he stated. "Evacuations already proceed through established channels. Defense preparations continue under existing protocols. Our commitment remains to the preservation of essential personnel, information, and cultural heritage." He paused before continuing, his gaze moving across council members with unusual intensity. "Individual survival cannot become our primary objective. What we safeguard through distributed survival matters more than any single life or legacy." The implications hung unspoken yet understood. Contingency planning beyond planetary preservation. Acceptance of potential sacrifice on unprecedented scale. Commitment to principles transcending physical continuity. General Reekan provided tactical assessment following Senator Organa's statement. "Imperial naval capabilities currently in orbit, sufficient for planetary blockade, but insufficient for planetary destruction. Standard procedure suggests intimidation rather than annihilation as operational objective. Historical precedent indicates escalating pressure toward capitulation rather than immediate maximum force application." The general's analysis offered cold comfort through probability assessment, yet uncertainty remained regarding Imperial intentions. Reports of new weapons capabilities circulated through intelligence channels. Verification remained incomplete due to information control measures surrounding Imperial military research. Council adjourned with implementation orders for existing contingency protocols. The absence of panic itself notable. Preparation replaces emotion when confronting circumstances beyond control. Process provides structure when outcomes defy prediction. Upon returning to my quarters, I secured these transmissions through additional encryption protocols, duplicated archives to isolated storage systems, implemented distribution parameters, ensuring transmission to off-world receivers should primary systems fail. Procedures developed for circumstances I never truly expected to encounter. Preparations suddenly, terribly relevant. Tonight the mountains appear luminous under Alderaan's moons. Their beauty strikes me with unexpected poignancy. How much we take for granted until its impermanence becomes evident. The specific quality of light across familiar landscapes, the particular configuration of geological formations shaped through millennia, details previously acknowledged without appreciation now precious through potential loss. I record this witness without certainty of transmission, without certainty of reception, without certainty of preservation. Yet the act itself matters regardless of outcome. Someone must observe without yielding. Someone must testify to what was and what came. The mountains have witnessed civilizations rise and fall. Perhaps they will witness whatever comes next as well. Their perspective grants context beyond individual experience. Planetary time extends beyond human perception. What seems catastrophic in personal terms becomes merely transitional in geological perspective. I find limited comfort in such thoughts tonight. Imperial vessels maintain orbital positions with increased activity among smaller craft. Shuttle movements between star destroyers accelerated throughout day. Communication traffic increased significantly according to monitoring systems. The pattern suggests preparation for coordinated action rather than continued surveillance. Palace security detected massive information access attempts throughout. Government systems. Imperial security overrides implemented across communication networks, transportation control systems, power distribution grids. The technical intrusions proceeded with authorization codes originating from Governor's office, bypassing normal security protocols without triggering standard countermeasures. Senator Organa ordered immediate activation of isolated backup systems. Critical government functions transferred to secure facilities, operating independent of central networks. Emergency communication channels established through older technologies, resistant to contemporary interference methods. The procedures implemented without public announcement, without official acknowledgement of the threat, necessitating such measures. I witnessed the senator record final instructions for distribution to resistance cells operating beyond Imperial detection. Information compartmentalized for security, each recipient granted knowledge of only their specific responsibility within larger strategy. The approach ensures continued function despite individual compromises. No single point of failure exists within the structure he created through years of careful preparation. The scope of his foresight becomes apparent through implementation. Contingency planning extends beyond immediate crisis management to generational resistance if necessary. Preservation of cultural knowledge, of political principles, of historical truth. The seed bank of democracy protected through distributed survival, even if its primary ground lies fallow under imperial control. When recordings completed, Senator Organa spoke privately regarding my personal security, offered extraction via diplomatic vessel scheduled for immediate departure. Positions secured through existing connections with resistance networks beyond imperial reach. The opportunity presented with uncharacteristic directness, the importance clearly transcending normal procedural considerations. I declined with equal directness. My responsibility remains to record, to witness, to preserve truth against revision. My position grants access to events beyond public awareness. The value of accurate documentation increases proportionally with the significance of events documented. If circumstances proceed toward historical inflection point, someone must maintain reliable witness. The role falls to me through position, through capability, through choice. Senator Organa accepted my decision without argument. His expression conveyed understanding beyond verbal acknowledgement. "We each serve according to our nature," he said. "The forms differ while purpose aligns." We spoke then of Alderaan, of its mountains and lakes, of cultural traditions preserved through generations, of philosophical principles guiding governance since before the Republic. The conversation seemingly disconnected from immediate circumstances, yet perfectly aligned with preservation concerns underlying all current actions. Tonight I walked palace grounds alone. The gardens display early summer blossoms, their fragrance intensified by evening moisture. Fountains continue their endless cycles, water rising and falling with mechanical precision, unchanged by political circumstances. The persistence of beauty amid uncertainty strikes me as quintessentially Alderaanian. Our cultural commitment to aesthetic appreciation regardless of practical conditions. The creation and preservation of beauty as resistance against forces that would diminish human experience to mere survival. The mountains reflect moonlight beyond the city, their presence constant despite contextual changes. What rises falls. What falls rises again in different form. The cycle continues beyond individual witness, beyond cultural memory, beyond historical record. Something in that continuity comforts, despite its indifference to our immediate concerns. I record this transmission without certainty of future access, yet the act itself matters. Truth requires witness. History requires documentation. Someone must observe without yielding to circumstance or pressure. The responsibility accepted becomes identity expressed through action. The mountains have witnessed much. Perhaps they will witness what comes next as well. An unusual vessel appeared in orbit today. Configuration unlike standard imperial designs. Size exceeding typical military vessels by significant factor. Preliminary analysis suggests specialized function rather than conventional naval application. The vessel positioned itself beyond planetary defense range while maintaining optimal position relative to population centers. Palace security intercepted fragmentary communications, indicating high-level Imperial personnel aboard the unidentified vessel. References to command authority beyond standard naval hierarchy. The designation Death Star appeared in multiple transmissions, context suggesting weapon system rather than military installation. Senator Organa received intelligence briefing regarding the vessel shortly after its arrival. The information arrived through emergency channels, transmitted by Alliance sources operating within Imperial communication networks. Details remained incomplete due to classification restrictions surrounding the project, yet sufficient information emerged to justify immediate concern. Planetary Defense Forces activated full alert status without public announcement. Emergency services prepared for crisis response under pretense of scheduled readiness exercises. Government continuity protocols initiated through secure channels. Preparations undertaken without acknowledgement of specific threat, yet the urgency behind implementation communicated significance beyond routine precaution. I observed Senator Organa during emergency council session following intelligence briefing. His demeanor reflected calculation rather than fear, strategic assessment rather than emotional reaction, the response of a man who anticipated current circumstances through previous planning, the weight of responsibility visible in his posture yet balanced by clarity of purpose long established. The Council received confirmation of Princess Leia's capture by Imperial forces. Her diplomatic vessel intercepted near Tatooine, current location aboard the unidentified Imperial vessel, now in orbit around Alderaan. The information arrived through intelligence channels maintained by resistance operatives embedded within Imperial communication systems. Fragmentary details suggested interrogation procedures implemented, diplomatic protections disregarded under direct authority from Imperial High Command. Senator Organa maintained composure despite personal implications. His focus remained on strategic response rather than paternal concern. The compartmentalization necessary for leadership in crisis situations. Emotion contained without denial. Priority assigned to collective welfare rather than individual circumstance, regardless of personal connection. The Council authorized emergency diplomatic initiatives through remaining loyal contacts in the Imperial Senate. Formal protests regarding violation of diplomatic immunity. Demands for adherence to established conventions regarding treatment of government representatives. Legal mechanisms activated with minimal expectation of effectiveness. Procedural responses to a situation rapidly exceeding procedural boundaries. Upon session adjournment, Senator Organa requested my accompaniment to the Memorial Gardens. We walked in silence through corridors increasingly empty as personnel relocated to emergency positions throughout the government complex. The quiet itself conveyed significance beyond ordinary experience. The absence of routine activities previously taken for granted. In the gardens, Senator Organa paused beside a reflection pool, capturing evening sky in perfect stillness. The first stars appeared above, their light doubled in water below, natural symmetry undisturbed by surrounding circumstances, beauty persistent despite context. "My daughter believes absolutely in the cause she serves," he said finally. "Her commitment extends beyond personal survival to principles she considers worth any sacrifice. I find myself proud beyond measure while simultaneously wishing she had chosen a less dangerous path." He turned toward the mountains, their silhouette darkening against fading light. "A parent always imagines they can protect their child from consequences," he continued. "The illusion persists despite all evidence to the contrary. Perhaps we require that illusion to function as parents. Perhaps the truth would paralyze us otherwise." I offered no response, recognizing his need for witness rather than conversation. Some moments require presence without participation. Some burdens cannot be shared through discussion, only acknowledged through attention. We returned to the palace as darkness settled completely. The mountains disappeared into night, their presence known but unseen. Like so many truths in these uncertain hours, I secured these transmissions with recognition of potentially limited duration. The act itself matters regardless of preservation. Someone must observe without yielding. Someone must testify to what was and what came after. The responsibility accepted becomes identity expressed through action. Throughout the night, emergency evacuation procedures continued without public acknowledgement. Essential personnel relocated to secure facilities beyond primary target zones. Cultural artifacts transferred to protected archives established through years of preparation. Information systems duplicated across distributed networks resistant to centralized destruction. The preservation of Alderaanian civilization through fragmentation rather than consolidation. I remained at my station, documenting procedures according to established protocols. The familiar routine of information management provides structure amid uncertainty. Process creates framework when outcomes defy prediction. I find comfort in methodical documentation despite recognition of its potentially limited utility. Morning arrived with unusual clarity. The atmosphere seemingly purified overnight, visibility extending beyond typical range. The Alderaan Mountains stood in perfect definition against cloudless sky, individual features distinguishable despite distance. Glacial formations catching early sunlight. Geological details normally obscured by atmospheric conditions suddenly revealed with extraordinary precision. Citizens commented on the exceptional visibility throughout Alderaan. Many paused during morning commutes to appreciate the mountains, the unusual quality of light across the landscape, the perfect reflection of buildings in the central lake. Ordinary people momentarily transcending routine concerns through aesthetic appreciation. The Alderaanian character expressed through collective response to beauty. Palace security reported increased communication activity from the Imperial vessel in orbit. Transmission patterns consistent with command authority communications rather than standard military procedures. The designated Death Star maintained position relative to optimal planetary coverage, while smaller vessels established perimeter containment configuration. The pattern consistent with containment protocols preceding major military operations. Senator Organa received notification of Imperial shuttle approaching with diplomatic authorization codes. The vessel requested immediate landing clearance for delegation led by Grand Moff Tarkin, regional governor overseeing Imperial military operations in the sector. The request delivered with expectation of compliance rather than as diplomatic courtesy. The Council convened emergency session to discuss response options. Rejection considered briefly, dismissed as tactically unsound given current circumstances. Acceptance with conditions deemed equally ineffective. The reality of power imbalance removed meaningful choice from the equation. Procedural forms maintained without practical significance. Landing clearance granted with minimal escort protocols. Diplomatic reception prepared according to standard procedures for Imperial delegation. The familiar routines performed without acknowledgement of extraordinary circumstances. Formality maintained as final expression of Alderaanian dignity, regardless of outcome. I accompanied Senator Organa to the landing platform as required by my position. The Imperial shuttle descended with precision, its design emphasizing functional intimidation rather than diplomatic consideration. The contrast with Alderaanian vessels striking in its intentionality, form expressing purpose without pretense, the machinery of dominance without aesthetic mitigation. Grand Moff Tarkin emerged from the shuttle flanked by stormtroopers in full combat configuration. His physical presence conveyed authority through posture rather than stature. The embodiment of Imperial doctrine in individual form. Efficiency prioritized over empathy. Calculation over consideration. Power over principle. Princess Leia appeared behind him, escorted by Imperial guards, including a figure in black armor I recognized from security briefings as Lord Vader, Imperial enforcer operating outside standard command structures. The princess maintained remarkable composure despite visible evidence of interrogation procedures. Her diplomatic attire replaced by prisoner garments. Her expression defiant rather than defeated. Senator Organa stepped forward with perfect diplomatic protocol. "Welcome to Alderaan, Governor Tarkin," he said, his voice steady. "We are honored by your visit, though surprised by its unconventional announcement." Tarkin smiled without warmth. "Senator Organa," he responded, his tone precisely calibrated between courtesy and contempt. "Your daughter has proven remarkably resistant to standard information retrieval methods. Perhaps familiar surroundings will encourage greater cooperation regarding Alliance operations and specifically the location of stolen Imperial technical data." The princess met her father's gaze briefly. Strength passed between them without words. recognition of shared purpose transcending current circumstances, connection beyond imperial comprehension or control. I observed this exchange from prescribed position, maintaining documentation protocols despite extraordinary situation. The familiar routine of information management providing structure amid chaos, process creating framework when outcomes defy prediction. My recording devices captured the interaction for historical preservation through secured transmission protocols established for precisely such circumstances. Tarkin gestured toward the palace with casual authority. "Shall we continue this discussion in more comfortable surroundings?" he suggested, the question rhetorical rather than actual inquiry. The delegation proceeded through security protocols performed with ceremonial rather than practical intent. Imperial authority rendering such measures meaningless beyond symbolic resistance. The performance of sovereignty without its substance. The final expression of Alderaanian dignity before its extinguishment. I followed at prescribed distance, maintaining position without drawing attention. My insignificance within Imperial assessment hierarchy, providing access through invisibility. The recorder unnoticed continues recording. The witness overlooked continues witnessing. Some responsibilities transcend personal risk assessment. Within the diplomatic reception chamber, formal introductions proceeded according to protocol. Titles exchanged with precise etiquette. Refreshments offered and declined. The choreography of diplomacy performed while actual power dynamics operated beneath ceremonial surface. Tarkin addressed the council with directness once formalities concluded. The Empire has exercised remarkable patience regarding Alderaanian support for terrorist organizations, he stated. Evidence has accumulated beyond plausible denial. Princess Leia's direct involvement in military action against Imperial installations removes all pretense of neutrality from your world. Senator Organa responded with equal directness. Alderaan remains committed to peaceful resolution of political differences, he countered. We reject violence as methodology, regardless of justification. If individual citizens have acted contrary to these principles, their actions represent personal choice rather than governmental policy. Tarkin laughed without humor. Your commitment to plausible deniability exceeds even senatorial standards, Senator, he said. Perhaps a demonstration of imperial resolve will clarify the consequences of continued resistance. He turned to Princess Leia with calculated cruelty. Your final opportunity, Princess. Provide the location of the rebel base or witness the consequences of your defiance. The princess maintained composure despite visible strain. I have nothing to confess, she stated. Alderaan has no military installations. Our commitment to peace extends beyond political convenience to cultural identity. Tarkin nodded, as though her response confirmed previous assessment. Then you have made your choice, he concluded, and determined the fate of your world. He activated communication device with deliberate motion. Commander, you may fire when ready. The statement hung in perfect silence. Its implications